At the Decred project, I am a community coordinator, so I deal with everything that is not related to code. In daily life, I'm a software tester, so I actually look at software and try to analyze it from a user perspective. So does it work well? Does it work as intended? How is the user interface? Is it usable for people who have no knowledge about the project? That kind of things. So I do know a little bit about code, but I'm not a developer myself. In my university time, I studied political science, so I actually have a background in governance. And maybe it's also good to note that I am based in the Netherlands, so I live near Amsterdam, and that's also where my accent comes from. So if you were wondering. The quote that really guides my actions is "act without expectation." So I really try to be as open-minded as possible. And what drove me into the blockchain space was really freedom and autonomy. So freedom to do whatever you think is the right thing to do, and autonomy, being able to do so without being hindered by any authority or a central third party. So that's really why I loved blockchains and why I got interested into the space and eventually landed here at the Decred project. So then about the presentation tonight, we're going to have a short introduction. Then I'm going into detail on Decred's blockchain, its governance model. And if you were sleeping the whole talk, I'm going to have an executive summary at the end of my presentation, so you'll be all freshed up. And we're going to talk a bit about the future of blockchain and Decred in particular. And if there are really urgent questions, you can ask them during the talk, but I prefer to answer everything right after. So let's dive into it. First, I would like to see some hands. Who thinks that Bitcoin was created to address the flaws of our current monetary system? Can I see some hands? Yeah, that's quite a lot. Not everyone. So what we believe for sure is that Bitcoin is a unique innovation. And we believe that this design should be examined and, where possible, improved. And maybe another short interaction. Who here in the room has no idea what a blockchain is? Okay, that's good. Everyone knows. Everyone knows in a sense what a blockchain is. So, first of all, it's decentralized, right? And proof of work. Everyone is aware of what proof of work. Proof of work actually means miners, people who maintain the network. And just to refresh your memory, there's 3 elements of a blockchain that make it so valuable and so innovative. It's a process of gamified timestamping, so the whole network can be sure that something happened at a certain moment in time. And basically the miners, the people who maintain the network, they get rewarded for their work, and this creates an automated issuance within the system. And last but not least, it's censorship resistant, so it cannot be censored by any government or any third party, which is a major innovation in the history of mankind. So if Bitcoin is so amazing, why would you actually change it? Why would you start up a new project? Why would you do something new and not build upon this current project? So there are a few reasons to start a new blockchain, and I'll be going into detail about each and every one of them. So first of all, conflicted interests. Within Bitcoin and within many digital currencies these days, we have a conflict of interest between the users and the miners. So as a user of a currency, I would like the transactions to be as fast and as cheap as possible. But the miners, the people who are actually operating the infrastructure, who are providing the blockchain to us, They want to run their operation at the lowest cost possible. And because they are getting paid by our transaction fees as well, they would like the highest possible transaction fee, because in the end they are profit maximizers as well. So this creates a direct conflict of interest between the users and the miners. There's a second reason why you would start a new project, and that's every software project, open source software project, has different development groups working for it. And what happened in Bitcoin? Bitcoin is written in C++, the programming language, as some of you may know. And what happens if you create an alternative implementation of the Bitcoin code? So for example, there was a group of developers who started an alternative implementation of Bitcoin in Go. And the mascot of Go is right there on the screen. And for a long time, these developers were sort of censored. They were almost blackmailed. The core developers who were at the time in control of the Bitcoin core software, they were telling companies and people not to run this alternative implementation. And when development groups clash like this, it creates a very unhealthy ecosystem within a project. The third and maybe most important reason why you would start a new blockchain is because Bitcoin has a lack of an on-chain decision-making system. So whenever people don't agree on how to solve a problem or how to integrate a new feature, you get a fork. And some of you here may think that forks are a good thing, right? Because it means free money. But it is actually really dangerous, because what happens if a project forks off, the different ideas, the diversity within a project, it splits off as well. So you get two projects which are a little bit more centralized. And the next time when there is a conflict of interests, the projects split again, and that's how you get really centralized projects. And also the likelihood of an 51% attack, so where one group of miners controls more than 50% of the network, becomes a lot more relevant if you have 10 or 15 different kind of forks. And ideally, what you want to have is a contest of ideas. You want people to challenge each other, and you want to find the best idea possible and implement that, instead of having chain splits. So where Bitcoin may or may not have been created to address the flaws of our monetary system, Decred was really created to address the flaws of Bitcoin. So this is the part where I'll be going into detail about Decred's blockchain. Are there any really urgent questions right now that cannot wait until after the talk? All right, let's continue. So because I know everyone loves history, I put a few slides of history of Decred. So there is 2 white papers that have been influential for the Decred project, which are the Memcoin 2 white paper and the proof of activity. And both of them introduced the concept of a hybrid proof of work and proof of stake blockchain. This is the basis of Decred. We launched the project in early 2016 without doing any ICO, without asking for external venture capital, no private investors. We launched just like Bitcoin or Monero, basically started up the miners, and everyone who wanted to join the project was welcome. And to kickstart the development, we had a pre-mine of 4%, which was airdropped to everyone who was interested in participating. And another 4% was reserved to fund early development, so we would remain independent and self-sustainable. And just like Bitcoin, we have a 21 million cap. So there is, there's a hard limit of 21 million coins. So the innovation that Decred brought into the blockchain world was really the hybrid proof of work, proof of stake blockchain. And we all know what a proof of work blockchain is. But the function of proof of stake in the Decred system is twofold. So on the one hand, we verify the miners. So the blocks that the miners create are verified by the proof of stake voters. On the second, we vote on proposed changes to the blockchain rules. So you can see this as, on the one hand, there is verification, and on the other hand, there is innovation. And I'll be going into detail about each of these aspects. So, first of all, the proof of stake voters have the ability to verify and correct the proof of work miners. One thing that frequently happened in Bitcoin was that the miners were able to mine blocks that didn't contain any transactions. They got the block reward, but for the people, it slowed down the network. You had to wait a lot longer to get your transaction on the blockchain. And with Decred, that wouldn't really be possible because the proof of stake voters could decide to vote down the block. And actually this happens automatically. The proof of stake voters, they run their software, and the blocks are automatically checked if the right consensus rules have been applied. And each block, 5 random voters have the ability to verify. And this creates really a balance between the holders, so you and me, the people who own the currency, and the infrastructure owners, the miners. So with the added proof of stake layer, Decred can more easily react and adapt to a changing context. So because we have this voting system that we can vote on changes to the consensus rules, we can really easily adapt to new technologies, to threats that come from maybe regulations or outdated technologies. And with Bitcoin, this is a lot harder because you are a hostage of the proof of work miners. If the proof of work miners don't upgrade their software, nothing will happen. But with Decred, we can actually vote on what we as a community want to happen to the currency. So I have talked a lot about the balance between proof of work and proof of stake. And you see this balance as well in the block reward, which is split in 3 ways. The proof of work miners still get the largest share because they do most of the work. So they get 60%. Then you have the voters who get 30%. And as you remember, each block there are 5 voters who verify the block. So each voter gets 6% of the block reward. And there is another 10% going to a development entity. And what the development entity is a fund where 10% of the block reward is added every block in order to fund new features, innovation, really to grow the Decred ecosystem. So let's talk about blockchain governance. It is a really hot topic these days, and it's been debated a lot. So let's give a definition of what we mean if we talk about blockchain governance. So it's really the ability to evolve and adapt as a community and make decisions together. And Decred's ability to do this is quite unique. And we implemented the hybrid proof of work, proof of stake blockchain in such a way that we can really evolve as a project. and no other cryptocurrency can currently do this. When we talk about evolving, we talk about code changes. So people actually have to start doing development work and implement a new feature. And before we actually start working on a controversial issue, we always request the input of our users. And to that end, we have developed a new proposal system. And this proposal system is actually open source. So any project can use the code that we are right now writing to create a proposal system for their community. So whether you are running a cryptocurrency or whether you are a university student, whether you have a company where you want to gather proposals from your employees, how to improve your services. So yeah, this code is open source, and basically what happens is that people send proposals. The proposals are time-stamped on the blockchain, so there can be no censorship of proposals. And people can comment on the proposal, so there's a peer review system. And proposals are ultimately upvoted and downvoted, so you can see the interest of the users to implement the proposal or not. So after a proposal passes, after there is enough interest to start the development work on this issue, we have a blockchain vote. And how we implemented blockchain voting is that we made it optional. And in order to vote, you lock your Decred into the blockchain, and in return you get a voting ticket. And of course, after you voted, you get your Decred back. And well, the price of a ticket depends on the supply and demand. So if more people want to vote, the price of a ticket is higher. And if less people want to vote, the price is going to be lower. And every vote, as we saw, is rewarded with coins from the block reward. And the tickets wait in a lottery for selection. And as mentioned, each block contains 5 votes. And on average, the voting time is 1 month. And if there are any questions after the talk about the voting system, I'll be happy to answer them. So the way it actually works, we have included a nice flow chart in order to explain the voting system. So we are talking about on-chain voting. So this is active on the blockchain right now. So this is not an idea or a theoretical possibility. This is really actually implemented in the Decred blockchain. Before we start the vote, we have the proposal, and if the proposal is agreed upon by the community, we start writing the code. And before we do anything, we implement the code into the software. But at that point, this new code is still sleeping. So it's basically dormant into your miners and into the voting software. So this sleeping code is implemented. And after that, we have an upgrade phase. So the miners upgrade, the voters upgrade. And if the upgrade requirements are met, so we need at least 95% of the miners to upgrade, we need 75% of the voters to upgrade. And if the upgrade requirements are met, we start the vote to implement the new code or not. Because right now it's still sleeping, so it's not really doing anything. So there are a few possibilities that can happen. First of all, it's important to note that the vote lasts 1 month. So we have a 1 month running election where a lot of people have the opportunity to vote on the new, whether to implement the code or not. We need at least 10% of the people to cast a vote, a yes or a no, because it's also possible to abstain from the vote. But because we want to have a representative amount of people voting on the issue, we need at least 10% of the people to show up and actually say yes or no. Then we also need a majority, and if the majority is not met, then we also have a revote. So in these two cases, we have a revote. If 75% or more of the people think it's a good idea to implement new features, then the code is activated. So the previously sleeping code becomes awake, and new consensus rules can go into effect. There's of course also the possibility that the vote fails. So the people think it's a bad idea, or they think the implementation of the idea is bad, then the proposal dies. And it's also possible to expire. So if we have a 1-year period where there is no decision, then the proposal expires. So the proposal dies. And after if there was a successful result, then we have a 1 month of a lock-in period. Because if you have an upgrade to the consensus rules, that means that everyone on the network needs to upgrade. So if you have exchanges running your software or wallets services using your software, you need to give them the opportunity to upgrade their software as well. So that's why we have a 1 month updating phase, let's say. So here's a short summary of how it really works. The code is implemented, 95% of the miners update, 75% of the voters update. The voting lasts for 1 month. Then we evaluate the results. We check all the votes. And this, by the way, everything is automatically, so it's included in the blockchain code. So there is no voting council or people who are tallying the votes. This is all automatic. And then after 1 month, we upgrade the code. So that's how the Decred project really makes decisions together as a community without having any central authority in charge of the voting system. So I know this was a little bit technical, and it was it was a little bit in depth. And I hope you're still awake. I want to go into the summary. So, why does Decred exist? Decred really is a decentralized autonomous currency, much like Bitcoin or Litecoin or Monero, but really improving upon them by learning from their flaws. And how do we do that? We added a layer of blockchain governance. So we have on-chain voting and self-funded development. So we can together as a project make the decisions about the direction that we want to go to, and we can self-fund the work that is needed to implement that. And what did we actually develop? A functioning hybrid proof-of-work, proof-of-stake blockchain, and 10% of the block reward is going to a development entity in order to remain independent and self-sustainable. So then, just a few words about the future of Decred, and about the blockchain space in general. First of all, we want to improve our proposal system. So we are testing the proposal system right now. The code is running, so we have a test website where you can submit test proposals. But the voting system is still being worked on. Secondly, we want to fully support the Lightning Network, so to be able to transact almost instantly with 0 fees. This is a real possibility. It's happening already on the Bitcoin network, and Decred is getting full support for the Lightning Network as well. We want to make the development entity, which is right now held in custody by a foundation. We want to make it fully decentralized. and create a decentralized autonomous entity. So there is no central point of failure in this whole funding system. Fourth, we have been developing a new privacy implementation, so to be able to transact anonymously. And many people have asked about what we are working on, and the short answer is, I don't know. The developers are really secretive about it, and they promise us that it's going to be a big change in what we've seen so far. So we have the ring signatures, we have the ZK snarks, but they are developing something completely new. And last but not least, the atomic swaps. And may I see some hands again? Who has heard of atomic swaps here in the room? Oh yeah, that's a real nice amount. And of those people, how many people know that the atomic swaps that are right now taking place between Bitcoin and Litecoin, that the software has been written by the Decred developers? Some people knew. Okay, cool. Yeah, it was actually the Decred developers in collaboration with Charlie Lee, the inventor of Litecoin, that wrote the tools that many projects right now are using to conduct atomic swaps between their blockchains. And for the people who don't know what atomic swaps are, it's basically a tool to go directly from one blockchain to the other blockchain, peer-to-peer, without any central exchange standing in between. So that's really a revolution in the way we can transact. Yeah, for example, going from Bitcoin to Litecoin, from Litecoin to Decred. And what's even better is if you can do this on the Lightning Network, so almost instantly without any fees. So this is really the future that we are aiming towards. So if you have any questions, you can of course go to decred.org/community, and we have all possible platforms that you may want to follow, such as Twitter, Telegram, Reddit, Facebook, Slack, Discord. So pick your favorite and get in touch. And this is also the opportunity to ask some questions if you have them. I see a few. Let's start here.
Not really a question.
Yeah.
It's more, I love this. So it kind of harks back to what BitShares is doing and what BitShares was before that nice covered the main design perspective. And I think that this is the way forward in regards to governance and how you will overcome the governance aspects in terms of the regulatory side of things. So if you guys were to be wiped out, this hopefully it doesn't happen, but it will still be able to carry on autonomously, and that's something that people really need to understand is the factor of this project, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and actually that's a really good point. The fact that I'm standing here, it doesn't mean anything. Basically, any one of you could have given this presentation. So that's really the aim, that we create an autonomous project that doesn't rely on any central figure or team. But yeah, anyone can contribute and anyone is welcome to participate. Yeah. So if you want to work for Decred, you are really welcome to join the team. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Question. Your code base.
Yeah.
At the moment, is it Golang or Java?
Yeah. So Decred is mostly written in Golang, and the code is fully open source and available on GitHub.
Okay. So the miners at the moment is 60%. The vote is 30%.
Yeah.
10%. And those who vote, what's their incentive to contribute to the improvement of the network? And the fact that you're embracing the Lightning Network combined with the atomic swaps, how does that affect the percentage of the miners?
So the question here is, what is the incentive of the voters to behave in a way that it's beneficial to the network? And a second question is, how do miners react to certain changes that are made? So the first answer is that the voters, in order to be able to vote, you have to lock a certain amount of Decred into the network. So enabled to vote, in order to contribute to the system, you need to show that you actually have a stake. So it's basically a proof of sacrifice, that you are able to sacrifice an X amount of coins, and that guarantees that you are going to make a decision that is beneficial to the network. Because if your coins are at stake, then you're going to make a decision that is the best for the whole ecosystem. And after you vote, you get your coins back. But yeah, in order to really influence a vote, you need to lock up a significant amount of Decred. And because the voting system is random, you never know when your vote is actually going to be mined. So if you wanted to, influence the vote in a bad way, then get your Decred out and sell everything, that's not possible, because your Decred are locked until you vote. And because it's random, you're going to have a hard time if you wanted to attack this voting system. And the second question, basically the miners are they are incentivized because they still get the block reward, but they it's a little bit sad to say, but they have no power in Decred. They do have the influence because they get coins for their work, and they can invest their coins into the governance system, so they can become stakeholders, voters themselves as well. But basically in the Decred ecosystem, they are just running the software, and they are, let's say, the servants of the network, instead of them being able to dominate what happens to the network. Is that a good answer?
It is. Just lastly, the verification of the atomic swaps is left to the miners to complete or to validate those sidechain transactions that must be added to the blockchain.
Let's do this question in person, because this is getting a little bit too technical. I want to get into some more. I saw upstairs, yeah?
So, this is a sublime solution to some problems of Bitcoin. What I have is remarkably like that. Because maybe I don't know.
Is this going to be a question or not? Okay. Get to the point, man. No, sorry, go ahead.
Does the Lightning Network contribute to a centralization of mining, which is against the original ethos of Bitcoin?
Mm-hmm. So basically the Lightning Network has nothing to do with mining power. The Lightning Network is a second layer on top of the blockchain that is created to make faster transactions possible, and also being able to scale the network. So what happens is that the blockchain with its miners, it stays completely the same. So the blockchain and the miners, it will remain unchanged. So the blockchain is still the same good old blockchain as you know it. But what happens is that there's a second layer, let's say it's put on top of the blockchain, where you can make transactions almost instantly. And I can compare it, for example, to the way you have internet banking built on top of the cash system. So I can go to the bank and get out some bills and give it to you. That would be really slow. But I can also just transact some money via internet banking to you, and you will have it almost instantly on your phone.
The security of all transactions is in fact on-chain.
Yeah, so basically what happens is that you open an account on the Lightning Network, and after you are satisfied with your transacted amounts, then you settle back on the blockchain. So the blockchain stays the same ecosystem, but you have a new layer where you can submit transactions in, and the Lightning network is basically
these people that have a capital that can set up these networks. So you basically wind up with a system that's only emulating the system you have back home.
Yeah, so you don't use it. You don't have to use the Lightning network. It's an optional system. Yes.
So when you vote on something in the UK, for example, if you don't get to your vote, those go your way, it's quite difficult to leave the country. So on this network, if you don't get your vote, the minorities can leave the blockchain. So, are you in danger of creating a community of anonymous who all believe in the same thing, and therefore they're free to vote? And if so, does that mean?
Yeah. So the question is, if you don't agree with the majority vote, what can you do? So indeed, one very important thing is you can of course sell your Decred and join another project where you feel you are better represented. And the danger that this creates is that the majority of the people that all agree with each other stay within Decred, and there is also not really a exchange of ideas anymore. Is that right? Yeah. All right. So one thing that is really important to know is that voting itself is what many times happens is that people actually agree on where we have to go as a project, but they don't necessarily agree on the implementation. And if you see that there is constantly a group that doesn't agree with how things are going, then you have to listen to them and you have to go into a conversation about how to make things better instead of already alienating them and forking them off the blockchain, basically. So what we try to do is we create a system where the vote only passes if 75% of the people say yes, and that 20% of people who might say no, they still have the chance to have their voices heard, to be able to try and influence the other 79%. And your ability to speak up and say what you think is right, it doesn't change. It's just that this creates a system where you are able to objectively see how many people agree with something and how many people don't. Because if you rely, for example, on Twitter hashtags or on likes on your tweet or on a Twitter poll, that's really not representative of what the people actually think. So this is a system where you can see how many people who actually control coins agree with the new changes or not. So we really wanted just to make a decision-making system. It's in a way, the decision-making system itself will not prevent people from having different ideas or different ideologies, but it really creates an effective and objective way of moving forward as a project. Yeah, so this is human behavior, so you can talk and you can go into conversation with each other in order to convince people that your point of seeing it is the right way. But in the end, we settle with a vote. And I think this is the most fair way that you can organize in a system. Okay, 2 more questions.
Yeah, related to that actually. So we just found out in the UK people can be convinced to vote something that isn't good for them. So what happens when some nefarious actors come in and convince the network through whatever means is necessary to vote for something that attacks the network and steal all the coins away, like kind of concept 50% stuff?
I mean, you can write code and you can create a blockchain, but you cannot fix human behavior, right? So really what the majority of the network thinks is the right way to move forward, that is going to happen.
I mean, it's the problem with all of these kind of voting proof of stake things is it's based on informed consensus. It assumes informed consensus. That's not always the case. In fact, it probably often isn't. So,
well,
have you got any sort of rollback mechanisms or something if that happens?
In the case of Decred, what is really interesting is, first of all, it's informed voting, but it's also the voters who cast their votes are actually having their money at stake. So if they make a decision that is wrong, their money is in danger. So it incentivizes people to really do their own research instead of believing what the God man says, so, or what the original vision of the Decred developers was. So that's one thing, because your money is at stake, you do better research. And the other thing is that the consensus vote, if we realize that it doesn't really work, we can vote to roll back. So, yeah. Last question.
So, just following on from that, so the education of the Lightning Network, it's almost people are voting on something that they're not actually sure is going to work further down the line. So, you just said you have another vote if that didn't work out.
Yeah.
There's a lot you say for your own research, but it's not being tried and tested.
But basically, the Lightning Network, you don't have to use it if you don't think it will work, because it's really a second layer on top of the blockchain. So if you think it's total crap, then just don't use it. Just keep transacting on chain.
But it still shares the information on the blockchain.
Only if you decide to use it. Do we have time for one more, or one more? Yeah.
I have a question about governance.
Yes.
So probably your project aims to address governance. Can you speak to how it compares to the solution that you're coming up with?
Yes.
How they compare to other solutions, like for example, Pierau's coming up with? I have another question. Can I ask two questions? Only one thing that I'll ask you a question on this. So, thank you. It sounds to me it's in a sense a little bit centralized, the organization of the world. And you're talking about moving towards being decentralized. And from what I've seen on Bitcoin, really, there's a lot of centralized power. Maybe it's not visible, but there clearly is. So what are the time frames, what are the mechanisms to decentralize? Because clearly there are developers who already come up with brilliant ideas. So it's difficult to see how the human nature will play out giving up the power.
Yes. Okay. So let's start with the second question. So right now we have actually a pretty big development fund of, at the moment, I'm not sure what the current price of Decred is, but it is between 30 and 40 million US dollars worth of Decred sitting in a development fund. And right now it's controlled by a foundation. And what are the incentives of the Decred Foundation to give up their rights to the address and really hand it over to the public, right? That's the question, right? Or what does prevent the people from stealing the money and running away with it? Or
the second question is about it sounds to me it's a bit centralized. You talked about moving towards being decentralized.
Yeah.
I just want to understand what are the mechanisms for that. How is it going to happen?
So what the plans are, what the plans have been from the beginning is that in order to spend from the Decred Development Fund, we also have a community vote. And we will make a snapshot of the ticket holders, so the people who are voting already on chain. They will be able to determine which transactions from the development fund will pass and which one will not. So I hope that answers your first question. And the timeline for that, we will release a roadmap for 2018. And I can already say that this is one of the biggest parts on the roadmap. So before the end of the year, we really want to have this done. But yeah, of course, it needs a lot of testing, because in order to release the funds into the hands of the community, you really need to be sure that the code that you are implementing is actually working, because yeah, we have seen how that can work out with the DAO, and
yeah, we really want to learn from mistakes that have been made in the past. So we test the code, and if it's really robust and ready, we implement it.
I think the lady meant, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Decred is going back to basics. They're kind of, how the early vision for Bitcoin, building a consensus, decentralized community. And I think you'll find most of the existing Bitcoin frameworks are centralized, even Bitcoin Core. So credit to Decred is the fact that we're just going back to basics, how the community should be.
Yeah. And we really are working as hard as possible to make it happen as fast as possible. But yeah, this part where the community controls the development fund, that is still ongoing, and we hope to implement it in any case before end of year. So that's one. And the other one, how does it compare to other projects? Yeah, so I'm going to be really, really brief. For example, the way Dash and other masternode systems are also having some sort of governance. You can see that a little bit as delegative democracy or representative democracy, where you vote, or actually where electives can buy their voting seat and vote on behalf of the entire network. And Decred is more a direct democracy, where actually the users can participate in the governance system. So it's more a direct system, because, for example, you need 1,000 Dash, I think, to run a masternode, and for a ticket you need a substantially less amount of coins to be able to participate. Yeah, so that's really, really brief. And to be honest, Cardano, I'm not sure if there are any Cardano fans, but it doesn't have a working product yet, so we cannot really compare the two. So, all right, that's it.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark.